Good evening. Thank you all very much for being here. Thanks to Mr. Lewis and the band for performing. I know you have many other places you could be tonight, so I really thank you, appreciate you being here. After I'm finished speaking, the cast of Almost Maine is going to come up and give you a scene from their performance that's coming up next week. You can buy tickets for that out in the vestibule at the box office. As you know, they do an amazing job with their performances, and you won't want to miss that next week. I want to thank all of the educators who are here to present and to share, all the students who are participating. I want to thank Amy Seaman for her help, and Arena Bocas, who's been helping me with my presentation, to Stacy Puzio and Heidi McLean for organizing this event. What I'm going to share with you here tonight is a vision for education in our community. It's not a detailed plan, it's a direction. And later tonight, you'll have the opportunity to go into some classrooms and to experience some of these ideas with some of our principals and teachers. And you'll be able to see some students thinking if you haven't already. And I ask that you please watch for additional details on Independence Television and in the Thread newsletter and in other publications from the school district. I want to thank you again for coming. I want to thank you for entertaining my ideas, and I want to thank you for thinking with me. Of the musician Bono, generative ideas have a lot in common with a great melody, a certain clarity, inevitable memorability. You can't get them out of your head. They nag at you. There's nothing more powerful than a person passionately and persistently pursuing a generative idea. Such people transform our world through grit, focus, by embracing uncertainty, willing to be disturbed. This is how I seek to lead learning in the Clarkston Community Schools. I dream that with my educational colleagues, we will create the conditions in our schools that foster in our students their fullest human potential. I wish to hold in our hands their hearts and minds as they experience an education, to shape their dispositions like a potter shapes clay, to collectively, as a community, rear each child, to have each of our children leave school yearning to learn. These are the schools I wish for my own children. The red thread I'm holding in my hands represents the connections, the lifelong connections between educators, schools, communities, and students. The brain is a beautifully complex instrument. It is perhaps the most amazing of all creations, yet we know very little about our brains. They are in us, and indeed they are us. The brain learns, and it lives. The brain grows, it smells, it tastes, it feels. The brain thrives in community. It is completely unique to each of our experiences, yet nearly identical. Everything that makes us different is contained in a very small percentage of our entire genetic makeup. I believe that the brain is the perfect metaphor for our schools. I want our schools to live and to be alive. I want our schools to sustain life and to thrive. I want our schools to nourish and to flourish. I want to adore their complexity and marvel at the uniquenesses of those who constitute them. Schools must learn and grow. They must produce growth. Our media and governments mostly consider educational outcomes as the scores students achieve on standardized tests. This, to me, is not only absurd, it's a problem. She did the very best she could for as long as she could on the standardized test she was taking in an unfamiliar desk at an unfamiliar classroom. She looked up wearily and she was distracted just for a moment by a light that shone through the window, and she thought about something that had happened on her way to school that morning. When she looked back at her test, she missed one more question and she failed. 6 months later, when the scores arrived at her home in the mail, her mother sat her down at the dining room table to tell her how she did. "I'm so stupid," she said. "I'm so stupid." Please do not insult me by constantly comparing my child to other people's children. She is one of 7.2 billion people in the world, and if we took the time to count every single one of us, it would take 210 years. Please respect me enough as a parent to talk to me about how my child is improving over time, the ideas and the skills she's developing. Please talk to me about the questions she's asking, about her capacity for good thinking, about her ability to use her mind well. Please talk to me about how she's smart, where she fits, what she can contribute, and how her dreams and passions might turn into her lifetime pursuits. Please help me help her realize her dreams. The entirety of a 13-year education cannot be condensed into a score on a single standardized test. There's so much more in whom our children become, as in an accumulation of their experiences, their relationships, their passion, and their uniqueness. I am blessed with two beautiful daughters, Haley and Chelsea. When each was born, I held her in my hands with tears in my eyes, and I marveled at the miracle of their life. Their beautiful skin, their eyes, their nose, everything about them was perfect. I wondered what their voice would sound like. I wondered which nuances do they develop. Will they twirl their hair in their hands when they're tired? Will they twitch their nose before they sneeze? A few years later, her preschool teacher asked me what I hoped for her when she grew up. I said things like kindness and curiosity, compassion, triumph, and endless possibilities. I wasn't thinking then about the scores she'd achieve on standardized tests, the career she'd choose, or which college she'd attend. I was more interested in how she would respond to the test she would face throughout her life, the challenges, the setbacks, the broken promises, the opportunities, the choices. No fear, no hesitation, I prayed. Dive in. Feel confident. Dream. Endure. Live. A few weeks ago, I attended the middle school career fair, and I began by asking the students, "What do you want to do when you grow up? Which career will you choose?" Their answers didn't surprise me. They said things like a pediatrician, a rocket scientist. They said things like a professional athlete and the first female president of the United States. And seeking deeper meaning, I asked them, "How do you want to feel when you grow up?" Their answers were similar to those that I had shared with my daughter's preschool teachers. Someone I'd be proud to know, a person who makes others happy. I want to feel helpful and excited and unique, they said. And my favorite answer of all time, undefeated. What a fascinating concept for our children to feel undefeated when they leave our school systems. Like nothing can defeat them, like there's no test that they can't pass, no challenge they can't overcome. No one can take away their dreams. And that's what I want for every child. Bubble tests, standardized tests, will never tell us what our children can actually do and who they are. As a person who's blessed throughout my life with incredible educational experiences, I feel a tremendous obligation to ensure that every single child experiences the best possible education. As I go throughout my life, some things truly bother me, and one of them is the effects of stress on children. There was a study conducted in the 1990s called the Adverse Childhood Effects Study, or ACE. It consisted of 17,000 participants who were asked to indicate during their youth how many times they had experienced things like sexual and physical abuse, mental abuse, divorced and drug-abusing parents. The average age of respondents was 57 years, and the results showed that 2/3 of them had experienced at least one of these stressors, and 1/4 of them had experienced 4 or more. The higher the ACE score, the more likely respondents were to have participated in addictive behaviors as adults and suffered from chronic diseases. Compared to those with 0 ACE factors or stressors, those with 4 were twice as likely to smoke, 7 times as likely to become alcoholics, twice as likely to have been diagnosed with cancer, twice as likely to have heart disease, and 4 times as likely to suffer from emphysema or chronic bronchitis. Those with 6 or more were 30 times more likely to have injected drugs. And men with 5 or more factors were 46 times more likely to have attempted suicide. Even if they had not smoked, abused drugs, or alcohol and were not overweight, they were 360% more likely to suffer from heart disease. In other words, the stressors they had experienced in their youth were endemic all the way into adulthood. This is a problem for me. Even if they had healthy lives, these things affected them all throughout their lives. So stress over which children have absolutely no control have profoundly negative effects on them. And this is a problem for me. Imagine how these stressors affect a child's ability to learn in school. Another problem that I've experienced, I've seen as I've visited schools in America around the world, is an inequity of opportunities and expectations for children. In some schools that I've visited, I've encountered fear and conformity. In others, expansiveness and freedom. One school, as I enter, I see security guards and metal detectors, and all the children have to have their backpacks checked. In another school, a beautiful glass atrium, a marble floor, and a coat of arms. One school asks students to do mostly memory work and to work independently, to do worksheets. The other, students engage in higher order thinking skills and leadership, and they work together. In one school, students drop out and never go to college. In the other, students earn academic scholarships and go on to America's most prestigious graduate schools. This inequity of opportunity and expectations is a tremendous problem. I believe in my heart that what we expect and the opportunities we afford to America's most privileged children must be the same expectations and opportunities for every child in America. I have a deep-seated passion to ensure that every child achieves her dreams. I believe that this can and must happen. No exceptions. So what are we doing about this here in Clarkston? Well, I want this community to know that we are re-envisioning education. We are altering the learning experiences of our students. We're not just concerned with data points and scores on standardized tests. We're much more concerned with the development of the whole child, the mind, the brain, the body, the heart, and the soul. These are the things that impassion students to learn, that lead them to lifelong learning. These are deeply personal things in our kids, things we have to recognize. We have to know them. And we choose to grow our students' minds and bodies and souls and hearts and brains by adopting a 21st century learning framework that's called a culture of thinking. And it's based on a substantial amount of research. A culture of thinking is a place where each student's thinking is valued, made visible, and advanced as part of her regular educational experience. In a culture of thinking, teachers utilize thinking routines to develop students' thinking dispositions, such as problem solving, critical thinking, connection making, and perspective taking. In a culture of thinking, learning is a consequence of thinking, and understanding is the ability to apply what you know. Students who experience a culture of thinking develop the skills, the motivations, the awareness, and the abilities to apply what they know in novel situations. Just knowing is not enough. Every child must possess the ability to show what she knows. In Clarkston, a culture of thinking is both who we are. Teaching and learning are very personal, and a culture of thinking embodies us. A culture of thinking in Clarkston is systemic in that it begins when a child enters school and continues all the way through graduation, and hopefully all the way through life. A culture of thinking is inclusive of all children. It's not just for kids who struggle or kids in the middle or kids for whom learning comes easily. It's for everyone. And it's also paradigmatic in that it shifts the way we think about children, what it means to be smart, what it means to learn, to teach, to lead, to contribute. In Clarkston, we give our teachers time to collaborate. We ask our principals to lead a culture of thinking. We explain cultures of thinking ideas to our community like we're doing tonight, and we give them an opportunity to experience them by visiting our schools. We seek consistency in our cultures of thinking journey, in our expectations, in our assessments, in opportunities, and in feedback systems for students and adults, and how kids experience an education, what they actually do in school. Contrary to widespread assumptions that the purpose of education is to first learn to read, to do math, and to do well on standardized tests, and then learn to think, the two actually go together. You can't have one without the other. In order to truly understand something, you have to mess around with it. You have to have knowledge. You have to infer. You have to make predictions. You have to see it from different viewpoints. Thus, the purpose of education is to learn to think and to use your mind well. Those are the outcomes. And when those are the outcomes, the ability to read and to write and to do math and to understand history, those are natural indicators of a quality education. They're indicators of a quality education as opposed to an outcome when students are thinking. I want the very best learning organization in the world for our children. Our kids require it, every single one of them. Many of our children have physical and emotional needs, and they're very difficult to overcome. Perhaps a child doesn't have enough to eat at home, doesn't have a stable home, or a warm home. And in Clarkston, we're very fortunate to have people who care so much about children and go out of their way to help them develop. We're so fortunate to have educators who work so hard and show up on the night before Good Friday to listen to the superintendent talk. We're not limited here in Clarkston. Limitations don't define us. Possibilities define us. And here are just two examples of how our community is working to give an equitable expectation and opportunity for all of our children. There's a young lady who's at our middle school. Her name is Abby. When she was younger in elementary school, her mother was unable to take care of her. So her grandmother and her teacher stepped in. And now, just a few short years later, Abby is thriving. She spent part of her summer out in California serving on the writing team of a youth journal. You may have seen her highlighted in the Oakland Press. She participated in a spelling bee with older children, and she did very well. Abby and her sister are thriving because people care so deeply here in Clarkston, and they make sure that she achieves her full possibilities, her full potential. Another student in Clarkston, as an example, is Drew. Drew's a 6th grader, and when he was in elementary school, and he still continues today to suffer from a seizure disorder, and some of his teachers are here tonight who know this story very well. And they were trained, his teachers and assistants, to respond if Drew should suffer from a seizure. And he did on many occasions. And they were there literally to save Drew's life. On the playground, in the cafeteria, in the classroom, on a field trip, they literally saved Drew's life. And this past December, during Christmas break, Drew was really suffering. He was taken to the hospital and they couldn't control his seizures, so they took him to Ann Arbor, flight lifted him, put him in a coma. And his teachers from elementary school and the aides he had worked with, they were there at his bedside, holding his mother's hand in his hand and reporting back as to how he was doing. Our community has very high expectations for Drew and for Abby. What was done for them is what every child requires, regardless of the adversity he or she faced in her youth, his zip code, or his parents' level of income. This is our collective imperative. When a school system thrives, a community thrives. A village raises its children. A child grows into the intellectual life that surrounds her, as Vygotsky said. According to Jeffrey Sachs, famines have as much to do with authoritarian politics as they do with climate function and crop yields. Likewise, failure in school, which represents missed dreams and opportunities, missed affirmations and obligations, are more a function of authoritarian politics, a community's values, and childhood stress than a single teacher in a classroom. When a community allows its schools to fail to develop the full human potential of its children, it condones failure. It is complicit in failure. And this is unacceptable. What I seek is permission to lead this school system with my heart, with my mind, and with my passion. My vision for our schools is not school reform, which was sent down from Lansing, something we're required to do. What I'm suggesting here is a fundamental redefining and an altering forever of how children experience education. Reforms go and come. Mindsets, beliefs, and cultures endure. To paraphrase Jeffrey Sachs, if we act wisely, an era of mutual benefit and collective action for every child will occur. This is our obligation to the next generation, and henceforth we will shape a new world for our children with their hearts and minds held in our hands. We will stretch this red thread that forever connects us, from conception through educational experiences to passionate, purposeful pursuits, through a lifetime of living. And over this lifetime, the learning journey, looking back, will unfold. The dots, as Steve Jobs said, will connect in retrospect. Along the way, each child will encounter tests. She will pass them, not according to an arbitrary prediction from some test she took, but according to her human capacity for grit, focus, and for embracing uncertainty. These represent the accumulation of her education, her mindset, her heart, her spirit, her disposition, the whole child. These are the tests for which educational experiences must prepare her and for which her entire community is obligated to prepare her. We may not live to see the results of these tests, but we can rest eternally knowing that our efforts live in her lifelong labors, her reactions to life's successes, opportunities, and challenges, her willingness to persist toward her dreams. My passion is a commitment. It's an obligation. Many people have contributed in my life to my knowledge, and I feel obligated to share it. I can't and I won't let it go. I see a day when the experiences of our children that they encounter in school will result in a lifetime of yearning to learn for every child. The educational opportunities that we afford to Clarkston's most privileged children must become the standard for every child in Clarkston. Generative ideas have a lot in common with a great melody, a certain clarity, inevitability, memorability. You can't get them out of your head. They nag at you. There is nothing more powerful than a community that passionately and persistently creates the conditions in its schools that foster in students their fullest human potential. I hope that the ideas I've shared with you here today, I hope they nag at you. I hope that this red thread forever reminds you that schools must function as fertile grounds for learning, where every child figures out how she's smart, where she fits, what she can contribute, and how her pursuits can fulfill her passions. As you experience the rest of this evening and go home tonight, I ask that you think about the questions you can ask your own children that help them think more deeply. Maybe there's a child next door and you can ask him or her some questions. Maybe you can do just a little bit. Think about it, and then do it, and then do it again, and do it again. And one step at a time, for each child, our vision will become their reality. I want to thank you for thinking with me this evening. Now we're going to have some students, and they're going to share some of the performance from Almost Maine. Thank you very much.